The night Geneva Porter was detained, the sky above East Alder felt like it had swallowed every ounce of light. It was the kind of quiet that came after something sacred had been broken. Only 5 days had passed since Geneva buried her husband, Samuel. 43 years of marriage, gone in a blink. He had been her rhythm, her shelter, her reason for speaking aloud at the dinner table. The funeral was dignified, small. The kind of goodbye only a few ever earn. But the grief? The grief was greedy. It clung to the corners of her home, curled up in the sleeves of his shirts, and creaked through the floorboards with every step she took. She didn't cry much. Not because she was strong, but because even her tears felt heavy with disbelief. Her neighbors dropped off casseroles. Her pastor left voicemail prayers. Her son, Marcus, Marcus wanted her to move. Out of East Alder. Out of the place where Samuel had built their lives. But Geneva wasn't ready. That evening, she put on her navy coat, the one Samuel liked, with the brass buttons and the soft collar. She tied her hair into a neat, low twist, slipped his wedding band onto a chain around her neck, and stepped out to drive to the cemetery. She just needed 15 minutes. Just enough time to whisper what she couldn't at the funeral. But 3 blocks from the gates of Hillcrest Memorial, she saw the blue lights flash behind her. She pulled over slowly. Not because she thought she'd done anything wrong, but because she had been taught, long ago, that slowness keeps you safe. In her rearview mirror, she saw the officer step out. He didn't approach with concern. He didn't even look curious. He walked like a man bored with paperwork and looking for someone to blame for it. Officer Colton Briggs was a name whispered with discomfort in East Alder. Tall, pale, smirk always resting just below the surface. He had 2 disciplinary warnings on file, both sealed. None of it had ever reached the papers. He didn't see Geneva. Not really. He saw a black woman in a dark car, with out-of-state plates. License and registration. His voice was flat, devoid of care. She gestured gently to the documents she had already placed on the passenger seat. Her fingers didn't tremble. Not yet. "Where are you headed?" "To see my husband," she replied, voice barely above a whisper. "Oh." He leaned closer to the window. "He waiting up for you?" She blinked. Confused. "I said," he repeated, slower this time, "is your husband waiting?" Geneva stared at him. He passed. "I'm visiting his grave." Briggs raised his eyebrows, as if amused by her honesty. "You dress like that for the dead?" She looked down. Navy wool. The necklace around her throat. "I need you to step out of the vehicle." There was no reason. No probable cause. Just a command. Geneva's breath hitched, but her hands obeyed. Her door creaked open. The street was too quiet. No witnesses. No movement. Just the echo of her heels against the concrete and the dull hum of injustice stretching its limbs. That moment, those 27 seconds between being asked to step out and being forced to place her palms on the hood of her car, would crack open something no one in East Alder was prepared to confront. Not the department. Not the town council. Not the mayor. Because Officer Colton Briggs thought she was just a tired woman in a sad coat. What he didn't know was that Geneva's late husband had once been the state's highest-ranking civil rights investigator. And her son? Her son was the incoming deputy district attorney. And by the time they realized who they had disrespected, the ink on her booking report would already be dry. This is a story about what happens in the dark when the system thinks no one is looking, and what happens when the wrong person gets treated like they don't matter. If you believe some things are worth standing up for, if you've ever wondered what real accountability looks like without a hashtag, then stay. Because what begins with a traffic stop on a quiet street in East Alder will end with a reckoning behind doors that were never meant to be opened. So don't just watch, witness. Stay with us until the final word, because what you're about to see isn't just a story, it's a slow burn undoing of power wrapped in silence. And when the final door closes, you'll understand why this case didn't just shake a department. It rewrote everything. Click on the subscribe button now if you haven't, and make sure you stay to the end because this story will teach you certain life lessons you never knew you needed. The cruiser door slammed shut like a judge's gavel, sharp, final, and echoing down the quiet lane like a warning. Geneva Porter stood beside her car, the cool spring air threading through the fabric of her coat, her fingers laced tightly together in front of her. She didn't tremble. Not visibly. But something inside her had gone very still, like a thread pulled taut, moments from snapping. Officer Colton Briggs circled her sedan slowly, eyes grazing every curve of the vehicle as if daring it to misbehave. His boots hit the concrete with rhythm, a sound too deliberate to be casual. She could hear the radio from his open cruiser window, a dispatcher's voice buzzing low and constant like static tension. "I don't see a sticker on your plates," he muttered, mostly to himself but loud enough for Geneva to hear. "They're temporary. Issued last week," she replied. Inside the window, Briggs leaned in, squinted through her windshield. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. "Georgia tags," he said, like it was a slur. "I moved here 3 months ago. My son lives here." Turned. "You have proof of that?" "In the glove box. Alongside my registration." He didn't move toward it. Instead, he stepped closer to her, eyes scanning her face like he was memorizing it for something. Geneva met his stare evenly, but inside, she felt her chest tightening. Not from fear, from something older. That dread passed down in looks and talks from mothers to daughters, teaching them how to survive being questioned for merely existing. "You got any weapons on you?" "No." "Drugs?" "No." He took another step forward. "Mind if I pat you down?" "I do mind." A slow smirk spread across his lips. Not playful. Predatory. "You always this difficult?" Geneva's voice was low, even. "I'm not being difficult. I'm asserting my rights." That was the moment. She saw it in his eyes, something uncoiled. Not rage. Control. The need to assert it. Turn around. Hands on the hood. "For what reason?" she asked. Briggs took a half step back and reached for his belt radio. Refusal to comply. Suspicion of evading identification. Her heart dropped, but she didn't let it show. "I gave you my license and my registration. They're right there in the window." "You raised your voice," he said flatly. "I didn't." He unhooked the handcuffs. Geneva exhaled once. Then, without a word, she turned, placed her palms against the cold steel of her car's hood, and let her breath settle deep into her lungs. The metal stung her skin. The air seemed to shrink around her. Behind them, the street remained quiet. Porch lights glowed dimly behind drawn curtains. No doors opened. No footsteps echoed. Just the sharp click of metal tightening around her wrists. He yanked one arm back, then the other. She winced. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice shaking now, not with fear, but with rage she was too disciplined to unleash. "You made it difficult," he said. "That's reason enough." He walked her to the cruiser like she was a shoplifter. Opened the back door, guided her down, not gently. Her knees buckled slightly, and he didn't wait for her to regain balance. The door slammed shut. Inside the back seat, Geneva's breath fogged the glass. Her wrists burned. She leaned her head back against the vinyl seat, eyes closed, trying to remember the sound of Samuel's voice. Anything to ground her. At the front of the cruiser, Briggs climbed in. The engine idled. Then a second voice, quieter. Was that necessary? It came from the passenger side. Officer Jade Moreno, a younger officer, early 30s, sat stiffly, hands resting on her thighs. "She was resisting," Briggs muttered, not looking at her. "She wasn't. I was watching." Briggs shot her a glance. "Don't start." Moreno looked away. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. The silence stretched. Then she reached for her body cam and clicked it off. The cruiser rolled forward. Geneva sat in silence as East Alder blurred by, the neighborhood passing in streaks of light and dark. The pain in her wrists sharpened every time the car turned. She didn't ask questions. She didn't protest. She simply waited. Because something in her knew, this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. And if they thought she would walk away quietly, they had no idea who they had cuffed. Miles away, Marcus Porter was in a meeting with the assistant district attorney, finalizing transition plans for his new role. His phone buzzed twice in his coat pocket. Missed call, mom voicemail, 022. He excused himself from the table. It was when he played the voicemail that everything changed. He didn't hear her voice. He heard an officer's. "This is Officer Colton Briggs of East Alder PD. Your mother is in custody. We'll notify you of booking procedures shortly." That was it. No reason. No explanation. No apology. Marcus stared at the phone. Then he stood. "Something wrong?" the ADA asked. "Yes," Marcus said, eyes cold. And somewhere across town, inside the holding cell of the East Alder precinct, Geneva Porter sat on a metal bench with her coat still buttoned, her dignity still intact, and her silence as sharp as the badge that put her there. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting. And justice, real justice, was already on its way. Because when Marcus Porter made a call, people answered. The East Alder police station didn't look like the kind of place where stories unraveled. It was modest, 2 stories of concrete and bureaucracy tucked between a fire station and a shuttered bakery. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like wasps, and the air smelled faintly of old coffee and bleach. It was quiet, deceptively so. But beneath that quiet was a pressure, the kind that comes when something is about to break. Geneva sat alone in holding room 3, the handcuffs now removed but the stings still pulsing at her wrists. Her coat remained buttoned, her back straight. The bench beneath her was cold, its metal surface grooved with the graffiti of those who had sat before her. She didn't look at the one-way mirror on the far wall. She knew someone was watching. Let them. Outside the room, Officer Briggs stood at the desk filing the arrest report, tapping the keyboard like it had personally offended him. "What exactly was the charge?" asked Officer Myers, the clerk on duty. "Obstruction," Briggs replied. "She got out of the car, didn't she?" Briggs didn't look up. "Eventually." Myers frowned. "You gonna book her or just hold her?" "Waiting for confirmation on ID." "She gave you her license." Briggs shot him a look. "You want to finish this report for me, Myers?" In the observation room, Detective Alana Ruiz leaned on the counter, arms folded, her gaze locked on the screen showing Geneva in real time. "She's not saying a word," said Captain Dorsey behind her. "She doesn't have to," Ruiz replied. "It's all over her face. She hasn't asked for a lawyer yet. She doesn't need to. Not yet." Ruiz straightened. "Pull her records." Dorsey hesitated. "You think there's more?" "I think we just cuffed the wrong grandmother." In holding room 3, Geneva let her eyes wander. A stack of outdated pamphlets about bail reform sat gathering dust on the corner table. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it needed to. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. She did not flinch. She didn't need to. Because she could feel the weight of what was coming, not on her, but on them. In another wing of the station, Officer Jade Moreno sat in the locker room, her elbows on her knees, head down. Her body cam was still clipped to her vest, powered off. "You saw what he did," she whispered to herself. And she had. The way he smirked. The way he tightened the cuffs harder than necessary. The way Geneva Porter didn't so much as blink in the face of it. Moreno reached into her locker and pulled out her phone. She scrolled to her notes app. Began typing. She wasn't ready to speak up. Not yet. But she was preparing. In Ruiz's office, Dorsey returned with a printout. "She's clean. No priors. Teacher for 25 years. Retired. Widowed. Moved here from Georgia last December." Ruiz skimmed the paper. Her eyes stopped at a line. "Son, Marcus Porter, Deputy District Attorney-elect." Dorsey let out a low whistle. "Yeah," Ruiz muttered. "You feel that?" "What?" She looked up. The building just got colder. Briggs strolled into Ruiz's office like he owned it. "Got the report done. She gave me attitude, was non-compliant, verbally evasive. Claimed her plates were valid but couldn't produce local ID." Ruiz handed him the printout. He scanned it. Then his face changed. "She didn't say any of this," he muttered. "She didn't have to," Ruiz said. "You didn't ask. I followed procedure." Ruiz stepped forward. "You cuffed a grieving widow outside a cemetery, Briggs. With no probable cause. And now you've got the incoming DA's mother sitting in a cell without a single valid charge." She was evasive. She was dignified, Ruiz snapped. Briggs opened his mouth. "Don't," Dorsey said, stepping between them. "Don't make this worse." Back in holding room 3, the door finally opened. Geneva didn't look up until Ruiz entered. The detective shut the door behind her, walked to the table, and sat down slowly. She didn't pull out a file. She didn't even look at the mirror. "I know who you are," she said softly. Geneva looked at her. "And I know what this is," Ruiz continued. "It shouldn't have happened." Geneva said nothing. Ruiz leaned in. "I'm not going to insult you with an apology. But I will tell you this isn't over. And you have allies in this building." Geneva finally spoke. "Then act like it." Ruiz paused, nodded once, then stood. "We're processing your release. A car will take you home." Geneva stood too. Her wrists still bore faint marks. "I'll walk myself out," she said. In the lobby, Marcus Porter was already waiting. He stood with his arms crossed, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his jaw set in stone. When he saw his mother appear through the frosted glass doors, something in him shifted. Not softened. Focused. He stepped forward. "You all right?" She nodded. "Let's go." As they turned to leave, Geneva stopped just shy of the exit. She turned back, just once, toward the officers now frozen in silence behind the glass. She didn't speak. But her eyes said it all. This wasn't over. This was only the beginning. Marcus Porter didn't drive straight home. After leaving the precinct with his mother beside him in silence, he took a turn onto Alderwood Boulevard instead. The streetlights flickered over the windshield like silent metronomes, marking the time between thoughts he hadn't yet spoken aloud. Geneva sat beside him, hands folded in her lap. Her wrists, still sore, rested against the fabric of her coat. She hadn't said a word since she stepped out of the building. Not about the holding room. Not about the arrest. Not about the officer's name. She didn't need to. Marcus had heard everything he needed in the voicemail. When he finally spoke, it was low, steady. "What exactly did he say to you?" Geneva turned her head, watching the quiet businesses blur past. "He asked where I was going. I said to see your father. Then he asked if I was dressed like this for the dead." Marcus's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. "That's when he asked you to step out?" "No. That's when he mocked me." They pulled into her driveway. The porch light was still on, casting a warm circle of gold across the steps. Marcus parked but didn't move. Neither did she. "You don't have to do anything," Geneva said. "I'm home. I'm safe." "That's not enough." He turned to her fully, his voice still calm, but weighted with resolve. "I'm going to file a formal complaint by morning. Internal affairs will get it first. But that's not all." She watched him carefully. "You're not just a son right now, Marcus. You're the DA of this town in 3 weeks. Everything you do will set a precedent." "Exactly." Geneva hesitated, then gave a soft nod. "Then don't set it with anger." "I'm not angry," Marcus said. "I'm surgical." That night he made 3 calls. The first was to Joanna Mercer, a legal ethics advisor who had mentored him through law school. The second, to Raymond Cho, a state attorney familiar with police misconduct litigation. The third, to Captain Dorsey's office, not to speak, just to leave a name and a time he'd be arriving with documentation. He stayed up until nearly 3 a.m. writing the report himself. No junior associate. No delegation. Every line was precise. Name of the officer. Time and location of the stop. The absence of probable cause. Geneva's clean record. The verbal exchange. The unnecessary detainment. He attached photographs of the bruising on her wrists, time-stamped GPS data from her vehicle, and a notarized statement from Geneva herself, which she signed with steady hands, no hesitation. By morning, the package was sealed and hand-delivered to the East Alder Department's Civilian Oversight Committee. No press. No leaks. Just truth, unfolded like evidence. Detective Ruiz received a copy, slid under her office door. When she opened the envelope, her face stilled. So it had begun. At the same time, inside the break room, Officer Moreno sat across from Officer Myers, sipping bad station coffee. "I think it's happening," she whispered. "What?" "Consequences." Myers looked up from the screen of his phone. Briggs is still on duty. Not for long. Moreno pulled her body cam from her locker that morning and turned it on before stepping onto the floor. Across town at City Hall, Marcus was in a closed-door meeting with the mayor. "You're not even sworn in yet," Mayor Langley said, staring at the formal complaint in front of him. "No," Marcus replied. "But I've been watching. And this time, I'm not blinking." Langley sighed. "You realize this isn't going to stay quiet. Once this gets to the board, we'll have council pressure, media calls." "Good," Marcus said. "Let them ask." The mayor leaned back. "You've already decided, haven't you?" Marcus stood. "I didn't make this decision, sir. Officer Briggs did." At noon, Geneva received a call. Not from the police. Not from her son. From a woman named Elena, whose father had been stopped by Briggs 6 months earlier. "I heard what happened. I just wanted to say, thank you." "For what?" Geneva asked. "For not staying silent." Geneva sat on her porch after the call ended. The wind rustled through the hedges. She stared out at the quiet street, knowing it was no longer quiet in the ways that mattered. At the East Alder precinct, Briggs walked through the hall like nothing had changed. But it had. Conversations paused when he entered a room. Body cams stayed on longer. Doors that used to swing open for him now required a knock. That afternoon, Captain Dorsey called him in. "You're on administrative review until further notice," she said flatly. Briggs smirked. "Because of one traffic stop?" Dorsey's voice was cold. "Because of one mistake too many." He slammed the door on his way out. Later in the day, Geneva was in her kitchen, boiling water for tea, when Marcus called. "They've launched the inquiry. Internal Affairs wants your statement on record by tomorrow." "I already gave you one. They want to hear it from you." Geneva was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Let them come." And somewhere, behind too many closed doors, power began to shift. Not with noise. Not with protest. But with a paper trail. With quiet resolve. With a grieving widow who refused to be invisible. And a son who refused to let her stand alone. It was raining by the time Geneva arrived at the East Alder Internal Affairs Division. The rain wasn't heavy, but steady, the kind that made the world feel slower, more deliberate. Water streaked across the windows as Marcus parked the car and looked at his mother. Her umbrella was closed beside her. She didn't reach for it. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" he asked. Geneva met his gaze. "I've done everything else by myself." She opened the door before he could argue, stepping out into the drizzle, the mist clinging to her coat like a second skin. She walked up the steps of the low brick building, back straight, expression unreadable. Inside, the waiting area was sparse, gray chairs, a coffee table with fingerprint-smudged magazines, and the buzz of a vending machine in the corner. A young black woman at the reception desk stood when she saw Geneva. "Mrs. Porter?" Geneva nodded. "They're ready for you. Just through that door." She didn't hesitate. As she entered the small interview room, she noticed everything at once. The soft hum of the recorder, the stale air, and the two officers seated across from the single chair left for her. One was a younger white man with alert blue eyes and a notepad. The other, a woman in her 50s with sharp cheekbones and a voice like gravel. "Mrs. Porter, thank you for coming in. I'm Lieutenant Paige Carter. This is Sergeant Lennox." Geneva nodded once, then sat. "We're recording for transparency and protocol," Carter added. "You're not under investigation. You are here as a civilian complainant. You can pause this interview at any time. Would you like to begin with your version of the incident?" Geneva folded her hands neatly in her lap. "I left home at 6:35 p.m. I was on my way to Alder Grove Cemetery. My husband was buried 6 months ago to the day. I go every month." She didn't flinch. Her voice never shook. "I wore my best coat, the one he always liked. I had flowers in the passenger seat. At 6:47, I was pulled over by a police cruiser at the corner of Everett and 9th. She went on, detailing the interaction exactly as it happened. "He asked if I was headed to see the dead. I said I was. He asked if I was always this dressed up to mourn. I said nothing. Geneva paused just for a moment. The room was still. He told me I seemed evasive, that I was being difficult. When I asked what the problem was, he told me to step out. I complied. He said I was resisting. Then he placed me in handcuffs. Sergeant Lennox scribbled something into his notebook. Carter watched Geneva's face carefully. "Did you feel threatened?" she asked. "I felt humiliated," Geneva replied. "I felt like I was being tested for how much I'd endure before I broke. And when I didn't break, he escalated." She shifted slightly in her seat. "I'm 68 years old. I've worked with children my entire life. I've buried a husband. And last week I was treated like a criminal because I didn't play the part he wanted." There was a pause. Not from hesitation, but from weight. Carter leaned forward. "Mrs. Porter, I want to thank you for the clarity of your statement. There's a lot happening around this case, but your words matter here. They'll be a central part of our review." "I didn't come to be thanked," Geneva said calmly. "I came to make sure the next woman doesn't have to explain her dignity." As Geneva left the room, her umbrella unopened under the gray sky, Marcus stood outside, waiting by the car. He opened the door for her this time. "They listened," she said simply. He nodded. "Now let's see if they act." Back inside the building, Lieutenant Carter sat still long after Geneva left. "She didn't just walk us through a traffic stop," Lennox said. "She walked us through a failure." Carter tapped her pen against the desk. "Get the dashcam footage, body cam, logs, and pull Briggs' record. I want every complaint, every warning, every closed case reopened. Something tells me Mrs. Porter's not the first." Meanwhile, Briggs sat in the corner of a neighborhood bar on the outskirts of town, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the news on mute. The ticker at the bottom mentioned East Alder Police Department. His smirk faltered. "Hey, Briggs," someone called from the end of the bar. "You see this crap going around? Some widow raising hell over a traffic stop." Briggs didn't answer. He drained the last of his drink and stared at his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. His badge was still in his pocket, but for the first time, it felt heavier than it should. And in an office just down the hall from Internal Affairs, Detective Ruiz met with Captain Dorsey. Geneva's statement is compelling. There's not a single part of it that doesn't hold under scrutiny. Dorsey rubbed her temples. "What about Briggs?" "He's not talking, but his history is going to talk for him." Ruiz placed a folder on the desk. Inside, complaints going back 4 years. Intimidation, verbal abuse, disproportionate force. None of them escalated. All quietly buried. "Then this won't just be about him," Dorsey said quietly. "No," Ruiz agreed. "It's about all the hands that protected him." As night fell over East Alder, Marcus and Geneva sat together in silence, a pot of tea between them. She poured. He didn't speak. And somewhere across town, a file folder grew thicker. Not with rage, but with receipts. Because justice doesn't always arrive in thunder. Sometimes, it arrives with paper. And persistence. Captain Dorsey stood before the mirror in her office early the next morning, not adjusting her collar, but deciding what kind of day this would be. Rain had washed the night clean, but what loomed inside the precinct was far from clear. The file Ruiz handed her yesterday sat unopened on her desk. She finally flipped it open. There was 4 years' worth of neglect hidden behind internal silence. Officer complaints marked resolved, citizen statements never followed up, and most damning of all, supervisor signatures, including her own. Dorsey stared at one signature for a long time. Then she closed the folder and walked into the war room. "Call a command staff meeting," she told her aide. "Top brass only. 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Briggs entered the locker room like it was just another shift. But it wasn't. Officers stopped talking when he walked past. He opened his locker slowly. Someone had scrawled a name in black marker across the inside. "Porter." He tore off the paper and slammed the door. Down the hall, Ruiz was already briefing Internal Affairs. The footage was recovered from the cruiser dashcam. No audio, but visual confirms Geneva Porter's account. Zero hesitation. Zero aggression. She's calm. Compliant. "Body cam?" asked one IA officer. "Disabled," Manually, Ruiz said flatly. A wave of mutters spread through the room. Ruiz added, Briggs submitted a faulty report. Marked the stop as a verbal warning. Didn't log the detainment. That's not negligence. That's orchestration. At 10 a.m., Captain Dorsey convened the command staff. All 10 division heads seated around a long wood table. She dropped the folder at the center. Every name in that file represents a missed moment. A silence. A corner cut so deep it's now structural. Chief Inspector Maynard leaned forward. Are you saying we open up past files? I'm saying we must. Not just to clear Geneva Porter's name, but to clean our own. Because if we don't, this entire department collapses in one sweep. Briggs, someone asked. Dorsey's jaw tightened. Suspension is no longer enough. As of now, he's under full departmental investigation. Badge, gun, and access revoked. Meanwhile, at the courthouse, Marcus Porter stood in the elevator, holding a folder with his mother's testimony, 3 prior case precedents, and a signed letter requesting a formal hearing with the city council. The doors opened to the municipal clerk's office. Filing or representing? The woman at the desk asked. Both. Back at the precinct, Briggs sat across from a review panel. Captain Dorsey didn't look at him like a colleague. She looked at him like a liability. Do you know why you're here? She asked. I followed protocol, he said. She was evasive. You turned off your body cam. He said nothing. You failed to log the detainment. Still nothing. You restrained a 68-year-old woman without cause. Finally, Briggs replied. She was acting suspicious. What does suspicion look like, Officer Briggs? He hesitated. She didn't answer my questions. Because grief doesn't perform and dignity doesn't dance for commands. Dorsey stood. You are suspended indefinitely pending outcome of investigation. Turn in your badge and weapon. Briggs laughed under his breath. So we're doing this now? Turning on our own? No, she said coldly. We're finally turning toward truth. He placed his badge on the table harder than necessary. The gun followed. As he left the room, Ruiz watched him pass without blinking. Across town, Geneva stood outside her church's community hall. She'd come to drop off books for the youth library. She hadn't told anyone what had happened. But the pastor knew. Geneva, he said gently, I saw your name in the council docket. She nodded. You ready for that kind of attention? I'm not looking for it, she said. I'm looking for accountability. He smiled softly. You'll get both. At the city council hearing that Friday, the chamber was quieter than expected. No cameras. No press. But everyone who needed to be there, too. Marcus stood and read the complaint on record. When he reached the portion about Geneva's treatment, he paused. My mother taught children for 30 years. She walked them home when buses didn't come. She made sandwiches from her own kitchen when parents couldn't afford lunch. He looked up. And last week, she was shackled for mourning. Silence. Then Councilman Reyes leaned into his mic. Thank you, Mr. Porter. We'll be moving forward with review of East Alder's policies, including those surrounding discretionary stops. Afterward, as Geneva and Marcus walked into the hall, she whispered, This doesn't bring your father back. No, Marcus said, but it makes sure no one spits on his memory again. And somewhere, in the filing cabinets of East Alder's darkest corners, truth began to scatter light. One complaint at a time. One silence broken. One department beginning to collapse. Not from force, but from a reckoning long overdue. The air inside the East Alder precinct had changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't panicked. But it was tense in a way that felt like something breaking quietly, one splinter at a time. Detective Alana Ruiz walked through the hallway with a sealed envelope in her hand. Her eyes scanned the bulletin board as she passed. A dozen smiling headshots from award ceremonies, a flyer for a precinct barbecue, and one pinned notice about body cam ethics training, yellowed at the edges. She stopped at the break room. Empty. Ruiz opened the envelope, her breath held. Inside, a printed report. Anonymous. But too precise to be speculation. It listed not just Briggs' misconduct, but names. Names of officers who altered incident logs. Supervisors who rerouted complaints. A clerk who'd purged 3 civilian testimonies from digital records. It even included badge numbers. At the bottom, one line handwritten in black ink. If you really want a clean house, start in Unit 14. Ruiz folded the paper, locked it in her case file drawer, and headed straight for Captain Dorsey. Across town, Geneva sat on her porch, sunlight warming her shoulders. Her garden was blooming late this season. Soft purples and waxy white blossoms swayed gently in the wind. But her eyes weren't on the flowers. They were on the envelope in her lap. A letter. From the Department of Internal Affairs. Her fingers trembled just slightly as she opened it. Marcus sat nearby, quietly watching her face for a sign. She read, then exhaled. "It's official," she said softly. "They're opening the full investigation. Not just Briggs. The whole unit." Marcus leaned forward. "That's what we wanted." She nodded, but something in her face stayed distant. "I thought I'd feel more peace," she admitted. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "Justice doesn't always feel like peace, Mom. Sometimes it feels like permission to keep going." Back at the station, Dorsey stood behind closed doors with Ruiz and 2 ethics officers from Internal Affairs. The report Ruiz handed over had already caused a storm. Quiet investigations were suddenly reopened. Audit teams began pulling sealed digital records. The IT department worked through backup servers to recover scrubbed files. Ruiz spoke without emotion. "Someone inside gave us that list. Someone who's been watching it all build." Dorsey crossed her arms. "A whistleblower? Not someone on the outside. Someone deep inside. Do we know who?" Ruiz shook her head. "They don't want to be known. But they want this to end." She placed a second envelope on the table. This one came an hour later. Inside were 2 things, a flash drive and a note that read, "This is what the blue wall covered. You choose what comes next." The room fell silent. Dorsey turned to the screen and inserted the flash drive. The footage was grainy. Some dashcam. Some locker room security. A few recorded training sessions. But the content was unmistakable. Officers mocking detainees. Jokes made in poor taste about race, gender, grief. A short clip of Briggs bragging about teaching a lesson to someone who acted too proud. And then, worse, an officer giving a warning to another rookie. "If you want to stay long in this department, learn when to shut up and look away." Dorsey froze. The audio ended with one line that clung to the walls long after the room went quiet. "We protect each other. Even when we shouldn't." In her quiet living room, Geneva sat down to write. Not a complaint. Not a statement. A letter. To the mother of a young man who'd once been arrested under Briggs' watch. She'd read his story online. The boy had spent 3 nights in holding for a mistaken identity and never got an apology. Geneva's letter was short. Said, "You are not alone. It's not too late for truth to matter." By the end of the week, Marcus received a call from a civil rights investigator with the Department of Justice. They'd heard about the case through formal channels, but what moved them was the tone of Geneva's statement. She didn't just describe what happened, the woman said. She described what shouldn't be allowed to keep happening. "Will you act on it?" Marcus asked. "We already are." Ruiz returned to her desk one evening, lights dimmed and the precinct half empty. She found a single note slid under her case file. "Keep going. We see you." She didn't recognize the handwriting, but she folded it into her notebook like it mattered. Because it did. In the middle of that same night, Captain Dorsey stood in her kitchen, making tea. No uniform. Just slippers, a worn t-shirt, and the quiet company of exhaustion. Her phone buzzed. A restricted number. She answered. A man's voice. Modulated. "I'm not a threat," he said. "But I know what they've hidden. And I have more. If you protect me, I'll show you everything." Dorsey didn't ask who it was. She didn't need to. Sometimes, justice isn't loud. Sometimes it begins with a whisper. The morning after the call, Captain Dorsey arrived at the precinct earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet breached the skyline, and the lobby lights flickered on as she entered with the sealed flash drive clutched in her hand. She didn't speak to anyone. She walked straight to her office and locked the door. Inside, she inserted the drive into a secure department laptop and began reviewing the footage the whistleblower promised. This wasn't like the earlier clips. This was structured, deliberate, chronological. It began with dated footage from nearly 5 years ago. Officer Briggs, Jr. at the time, was seen detaining a teenager outside a convenience store. No cause was visible. The boy was handcuffed, searched, and then shoved into the cruiser. There was no report ever filed. Then another clip, Briggs again, in a heated exchange with a female officer. She argued against his treatment of a civilian. He waved her off. She was transferred 2 months later to a lesser unit. Clip after clip. Report after report. And all of them had one thing in common. They disappeared. The fallout had already begun. By noon, Internal Affairs had filed emergency subpoenas. Officers mentioned in the footage were called in one by one. Some deflected. Others folded immediately. And at the center of it all was Geneva's name, her story, the stone that disrupted everything still. The media hadn't gotten hold of the internal probe yet. But rumors were leaking. Officers who once avoided Geneva in silence were now quietly reaching out, offering apologies in whispers or long looks of shame. Ruiz sat with Geneva again that afternoon in a quiet backroom offsite. "We believe the whistleblower was part of Unit 14, she said. "We're still working to confirm, but what they've provided goes deeper than we thought." Geneva nodded slowly. "I don't need to know their name. I just need to know it matters." Ruiz softened. "It does." Marcus had spent the day on calls. A local news outlet had left 3 voicemails asking for comment. A university law department invited him to speak on civil response litigation. He turned them all down. He wasn't done yet. That night, he sat in his apartment, writing a draft of a petition, not for money, not for spotlight, for policy change. A clause requiring every body cam deactivation to trigger an automatic review. He called it the Porter Protocol. Back at the precinct, Dorsey called in a meeting of the remaining command staff. But this time, there was no long table. They stood in a circle. "This is no longer about damage control," she said. "This is reform. You're either with it or in the way of it." Her voice was low but resolute. She handed out printed copies of a new ethics directive, one that mirrored Marcus's petition almost word for word. Some nodded. Some swallowed hard. But no one left the room. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment across the city, an older black woman sat alone with her tea and a newspaper open to the op-ed section. Geneva had written her first public statement. Not for vengeance. Not even for validation. But for visibility. Her words read, "This is not a story about a bad officer. This is a story about silence, culture, and the slow erosion of dignity. My name is Geneva Porter. I was detained while grieving. And I'm not an exception. I am just one who spoke." The paper's editor called it the most powerful piece they'd published that year. Later that week, Marcus and Geneva stood outside the city council building again, this time not to testify, but to attend the vote. Inside, behind thick walls and stiff collars, the motion passed. Unanimous. The Porter Protocol was adopted as municipal law. As they walked back to the car, Geneva paused, her eyes wet but steady. "This doesn't mean it's over," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "But it means they can't pretend anymore." And for once, the silence felt like something had shifted. Not broken. Not screamed. Shifted. Toward something more honest. Toward something that might, finally, become just. But even as that chapter closed, far beneath the surface, the voice on the other end of Dorsey's midnight call watched. Waiting. Because there was still more truth. And it hadn't all been spoken yet. The sun spilled through the narrow windows of the church sanctuary as Geneva sat in the front pew, a Bible in her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in over 20 minutes. Her thoughts were elsewhere. She had spent most of her life being a quiet strength for others. Now, the world wanted her to keep speaking. Behind her, the wooden doors creaked open. Pastor Elijah stepped in quietly, his voice warm. "You've got a visitor, Geneva." Says he doesn't want to speak to anyone but you. Geneva turned. Standing in the doorway was a man in his early 40s. Medium brown skin. Slender frame. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived too long in the shadows. He stepped forward slowly, removing a plain baseball cap as he approached. "My name is Darrell Lake," he said quietly. "I used to work in Unit 14. I saw what they did to you. And I saw what they did to a lot of us. I couldn't speak before, but I'm ready now." Ruiz sat at her desk with a cup of stale coffee when the call came in. "You might want to come down to the First Baptist Church," the pastor said. "Someone's ready to talk. And he's not hiding behind paper trails." By the time Ruiz arrived, Darrell was already seated in the back room with Geneva and Pastor Elijah nearby. Geneva stayed silent as Darrell spoke, his voice trembling but unbroken. "I logged the complaints. I saw the reports. I watched them disappear. I watched good people, officers, citizens, get silenced. And I kept my head down because I was scared. They made an example out of anyone who didn't. But what happened to Ms. Porter, that broke something in me." Ruiz nodded slowly. "Do you have names?" "Yes." "Do you have proof?" Darrell pulled a small black flash drive from his coat pocket. "This has everything. Backup copies. Scan memos. Original timestamps. Audio from locker rooms." Then, he hesitated. "And a recording of Briggs. Saying it wasn't about law, it was about putting people in their place." His words. Not mine. Ruiz exhaled sharply. Geneva finally spoke. "Why now?" Darrell looked at her. "Because you stood when nobody else did. Because your son didn't back down. And because I've carried this guilt too long." Later that day, in a secured room at Internal Affairs, Ruiz played the audio. Briggs' voice was unmistakable. Crass. Arrogant. Half of them just need to be reminded who runs the streets. If they act too proud, you knock him down a peg. A second voice chuckled. "That old woman, what's her name? Porter? She looked like she was gonna cry." Briggs laughed. "She should have stayed in her lane." Silence in the room. Then Ruiz clicked pause. That single recording changed the entire direction of the investigation. Dorsey met Ruiz in the hallway. "We've got enough to indict," Ruiz said. "Not just Briggs. 3 others. Maybe more." Dorsey nodded grimly. "Take it to the DA. Full coordination. I don't want this buried in internal reviews." She paused, then added, "And tell Geneva. She deserves to know what her courage started." That evening, Marcus sat across from his mother on the porch, watching the sun dip low. He had just gotten off a call with the district attorney's office. "They're moving forward," he told her. "Criminal charges. It's happening." Geneva didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Then she turned to Marcus. "You know what hurts most?" He waited. "That I ever believed it was safer to stay silent." Meanwhile, Darrell Lake sat alone in his car outside the precinct, watching the doors he used to walk through every day. He didn't want recognition. He didn't want reward. He just wanted to live with himself again. When Ruiz called him later that week to update him on the indictments, he didn't ask for details. He only asked one question. "Will this stop others from going through what she did?" Ruiz's voice was soft. "It won't stop everything. But it stops pretending. And sometimes, that's where real change begins." Darrell didn't say anything. But in that silence, something settled in him. For the first time in years, he slept without the weight of secrets on his chest. And Geneva? She returned to the classroom. Not to teach full-time. Just to read to the children once a week. And when one of the students asked who she was, another child said softly, "That's the lady who made things better." Geneva smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because it meant something now. The courtroom buzzed with a low current of tension, like static before a storm. Reporters had begun circling the courthouse steps before sunrise. A handful of protesters, silent and scattered, stood with cardboard signs, but this wasn't a media frenzy. It was a reckoning wrapped in hushed tones and sharp eyes. Inside, the district courtroom was polished and cold. Geneva sat on the left side of the gallery, her son Marcus beside her. She wore a navy blue coat, modest pearl earrings, and a face carved from composure. She didn't come to watch a spectacle. She came to witness truth spoken aloud, under oath. Briggs sat at the defense table, his jaw clenched, suit stiff, eyes darting. This wasn't the man who once laughed about breaking people's dignity. This was a man cornered by a mirror of his own making. Beside him, his lawyer flipped through pages with a mechanical rhythm. The indictment listed charges of misconduct, falsifying reports, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. 3 other officers from Unit 14 sat behind him, each a thread unraveling from the same corrupt cloth. The judge, a black woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense tone, called the court to order. What followed was not dramatic testimony or cinematic revelation. It was cold, deliberate, and irrefutable. Darrell Lake took the stand first. He spoke slowly, carefully, without embellishment. He described the culture of silence, the subtle threats. The night Briggs threatened to plant evidence on a teen just to make a quota. The day a fellow officer wept in the locker room after being ordered to turn off her body cam. Then came the evidence. The audio recordings. The time-stamped internal memos. The missing complaint forms, now recovered. The prosecution played a clip of Briggs mocking Geneva's arrest. A hush fell over the courtroom. Geneva didn't blink. Midway through the proceedings, Marcus stepped out into the hallway to breathe. He stood by the marble columns, watching the city move in slow motion. A young woman approached him. Early 20s, maybe. Nervous hands. She clutched her phone but didn't raise it. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "My brother, he had something happen like this. We didn't fight back. I didn't think we could. But your mom, she changed something." Marcus nodded. He didn't have words, but his eyes held enough. Inside, Geneva remained still as another officer took the stand. She had worked under Briggs. She testified about falsified reports and unspoken quotas targeting certain neighborhoods. When the defense tried to discredit Darrell's motives, the judge cut them off. "The integrity of truth is not measured by the comfort it disrupts," she said. The gallery stirred. By the second day, Briggs' demeanor had shifted. He no longer whispered to his lawyer. He no longer scanned the room. He stared at Geneva. And when she met his eyes, she didn't look away. He was not her fear. He was her history, exposed. Outside the courthouse that evening, a reporter called to Geneva, hoping for a comment. She paused, turned. "This was never about vengeance," she said. "It was about the silence we pretend protects us. I just decided not to pretend anymore." That night, Ruiz stood alone in the evidence room, watching the last clips play. She cataloged every file, every note. She knew more cases would open. Some names on those tapes hadn't yet been mentioned. But this was a start. And Darrell? He stood at the back of the courtroom the next morning, wearing a plain shirt and a quiet expression. He didn't want to be seen. He wanted to be heard. As the court prepared to close for the week, the judge looked over the room. Her voice steady. "Let this be known. The court does not only try people. It tries systems. It tries cultures. And sometimes, it tries the ghosts we allowed to haunt our silence." Briggs lowered his head. The gavel echoed. And Geneva Porter, for the first time in a long time, exhaled without weight pressing on her chest. But justice, she knew, was not a destination. It was a direction. And they were finally facing it. Together. A month after the verdict, East Alder had returned to its routine, but with a quiet shift beneath the surface. The grocery store clerks lingered a little longer in conversation. The precinct front desk now greeted people with something closer to care. It wasn't change written in headlines. It was change written in small acts, soft and steady. Geneva sat on a park bench near the courthouse lawn, the same park she'd walked through 100 times before. This time, her steps had felt different. Slower but not tired. Reflective. She carried with her a paperback copy of Maya Angelou's "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings," a gift from a young girl she had once read to at the neighborhood library. On the bench beside her sat a folded copy of the local newspaper. The front page showed a photo of the city council in a unanimous vote, approving a new citizen-led police oversight committee. Beneath the photo, a headline read, "Community moves forward, thanks to one woman's stand." Geneva didn't read the article. She already knew the story. It wasn't hers alone, it was every quiet voice that chose truth over comfort. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked into a modest rec center where a local youth mentorship program was holding a leadership workshop. He wasn't on the flyer. He hadn't planned to speak. But when one of the facilitators saw him walk in, she handed him the mic. Marcus stood for a long moment, just holding it. Then he said, "Most of the time, justice doesn't look like courtrooms or protests. It looks like ordinary people refusing to let lies go unchecked." He shared how watching his mother's quiet resilience taught him more about leadership than any title ever could. Not because she was perfect, but because she stayed present, even when presence cost everything. The room was still when he finished. No applause. Just young men and women nodding, eyes fixed, holding something invisible but heavy in their chests. Ruiz had moved offices. Her new post in civil accountability came with less friction and more resistance, oddly enough. Still, her work felt honest. Her first initiative was a program protecting whistleblowers from retaliation. They named it the Lake Act, unofficially. She never told Daryl, but she figured he'd find out eventually. Daryl, for his part, had taken a quiet job out of state, working in document integrity for a nonprofit. When he saw the article about the new oversight committee, he smiled faintly and clicked the tab closed. He had said what needed saying. That was enough. And Geneva? She returned to her routines. Tending to her garden. Visiting neighbors. Occasionally tutoring kids at the church after school. She didn't lead rallies. She didn't write a memoir. She simply lived, whole again. Until one spring morning she received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, sharp, slanted, deliberate. It was from Briggs. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't justify his actions. He only wrote, "I believed fear made me powerful. I was wrong. Your silence outlasted my noise. You didn't destroy me. You revealed me. And for the first time, I think I finally saw myself." Geneva folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with others she never reread. Some confessions are for the record, not for the heart. A few weeks later, while walking with her granddaughter Ava, Geneva paused at the corner where she had once been humiliated. Nothing marked it now. No plaque. No memorial. Just pavement and sky. Ava asked, "Grandma, what does it mean to be brave?" Geneva looked down at her and said, "It means not walking away, even when you really want to." And maybe someone watching this right now is facing that same moment. A hallway. A uniform. A lie spoken too easily. A silence too heavy to carry alone. Maybe your story hasn't been heard yet. Maybe you think it never will be. But remember this, truth has a long memory. And justice? It listens for those who dare to whisper before the world is ready to hear. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't let it stay there. Hit subscribe to follow stories the world would rather forget, but we choose to remember. Like this video if you believe dignity deserves a voice, even in the darkest rooms. And share in the comments. What's one moment in your life that made you choose silence, or made you break it? Let's talk about the moments that shaped us. Let's honor the voices that rose when it was hardest to speak. Your story might be the light someone else is looking for.